Hello and welcome. It's Friday at last. We've made it. Welcome to Food Safety Fridays. My name's Simon Timperley from the International Food Safety and Quality Network. And today, our great friend Tony Connor, who's actually the Chief Technical Advisor for IFSQN, is joining us, and the session is implementing an SQF Code Edition 9 compliant food safety management system. So welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Simon. Hi, everybody.
Is my video freezing again? You can hear me, can you? Okay.
I can see you and hear you fine.
Good. Right. Okay. I'm joining from Manchester today in the UK, where it's rather drizzly. And where are you today, Tony?
Just north of Bangkok in Thailand.
Very good. Sunny weather?
Not too bad today, but we've had a fair bit of rain.
And
lately.
Okay, well, similar to us. Tell us where you're joining from. You don't have to say what the weather's like, but you're welcome. Jomana from Toronto, Ruchi from Vancouver, Georgia, Minnesota, Texas, Hertfordshire, everywhere, all over the world. Welcome. We're going to play the sponsors ads now, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes for the presentation. Okay, I'll be back for the Q&A later, but for now, I'll hand you over to Tony. I can't hear you, Tony. No sound.
My apologies.
Got you.
I saw it turned off the sound for the video. Okay, so today we're going to cover implementing an SQF food safety management system and look at compliance with the Food Safety Code for Manufacturing, SQF Addendum for Preventive Controls for Human Food, and Codex General Principles of Food Hygiene. Okay, GFSI recognition offers a passport to a global market via benchmark standards. These certification program owners are currently recognized against version 2020 of the GFSI benchmarking requirements and include SQF. The SQF program has been owned and managed by the Food Marketing Institute since 2003 and was first recognized by GFSI in 2004. SQFI publishes a suite of globally recognized food safety and quality codes that cover all aspects of the food safety supply chain. All standards are available free of charge to download at the SQFI website. The SQF addendum FSMA addendum is a valuable tool to help suppliers identify and understand any differences between the SQF program and the preventive control rules. Used in conjunction with the SQF Food Safety Code for food manufacturing, this addendum explains the additional requirements needed to comply with the FDA PC rule. The value of SQF certification was boosted by the FDA announcement in July 2023, acknowledging that the SQF program standards are aligned with applicable FDA regulations. There are a number of areas to address where the SQF code is not specific to the rule. We will highlight the SQF addendum additional requirements as we go through the presentation. Revised Codex General Principles of Food Hygiene Guidelines have been published, including a new decision tree, which is on the right. In the new decision tree, there's a couple of significant changes, including question 1, can the significant hazard be controlled to an acceptable level at this step by prerequisite programs? Yes, this step is not a CCP, no, go to question 2. And so on, down to question 4, where can this step be specifically prevent or eliminate the identified significant hazard or reduce it to an acceptable level? Yes, this is a CCP. So these guidelines were updated in 2020 and the new decision tree added in 2022. SQF advises these steps to achieving SQF certification. The SQF code for food manufacturing has 2 modules, which includes System Elements and Module 11. System Elements has 9 sections. Module 11 has 8 sections. We'll come on to that later. So system elements. The first section is management commitment. Management should demonstrate commitment as per 2.1.1 management responsibility and prepare and implement a food safety policy statement that includes a commitment to comply with customer and regulatory requirements, establish a food safety culture and continually improve. There should be commitment from all site management to supply safe food and to establish and continually improve the site's food safety management system. The policy statement should be signed by the senior site manager and displayed in prominent positions. It should be effectively communicated to all site personnel in languages understood by all site personnel. Site management shall ensure that departments or operations are staffed and aligned to meet food safety objectives. A fundamental factor in the management of product safety is safety culture. The SQF code requires site senior management to lead and support a food safety culture. For this culture to flourish, the importance of product safety needs to be understood by all members of staff. It needs to be led from the top of the organisation to ensure that necessary commitment and resources are available. There should be communication to all relevant staff of food safety objectives and performances. Resources should be available to meet food safety objectives. Food safety practices should be adopted and maintained. Employees should be informed and held accountable for their food safety and regulatory responsibilities. Employees should be empowered to act to resolve food safety issues. You may recall this one. This ex-owner of Peanut Corporation was convicted of knowingly shipping tainted products, which clearly isn't a food safety culture. Senior management should be delivering "it is how we do things here" by demonstrating leadership from the top, demonstrating visible commitment, developing employee confidence and mutual trust, developing an action plan for the development and continuing improvement of food safety culture. Senior management must define the organizational reporting structure, and responsibility for food safety shall be identified and communicated. Senior management should ensure adequate resources are available. Senior management must designate an SQF practitioner and substitute practitioner for each site. All staff must be informed of their responsibility to report food safety problems. Job descriptions for those responsible for food safety and legality must be documented. Senior management need to ensure the training needs of the site are resourced and that site personnel have the required competencies to carry out those functions. In order to have an effective site, there needs to be effective communication and contribution from all departments. Management reviews need to be carried out at a minimum annually and include changes to the food safety management system documentation, including policies, procedures, etc., food safety culture performance, food safety plans, food safety objectives and key performance indicators, corrective and preventive actions, findings from internal audits, customer complaints, verification and validation activities, and follow-up actions from previous management reviews. There should be a documented procedure for handling customer complaints, which include details of who is responsible for investigating the cause and resolution of customer complaints. To get this valuable feedback, complaint reporting must generate information swiftly and systematically to the appropriate managements or departments. Initial screening should trigger immediate action when necessary. This is from previous SQF guidance. Customer complaints may be the first record that an auditor asks to review when beginning the site audit. Customer complaints provide an important measure of how well the SQF system is performing. By accurately recording customer complaint types, a supplier can objectively measure changes in their management system and show improvements in a process. Customer complaints may also show trends that have not been identified during processing and normal process control checks. There should be records of complaints with details of investigations, and these should be maintained. This is an example of a completed investigation form. For serious or repetitive complaints, root cause analysis can be conducted using the 5 whys technique. Corrective action should be implemented commensurate with the seriousness of the incident. Adverse trends of customer complaints should be investigated and analysed and the root cause established. I use an annual complaint analyzer to do this. Complaints are analysed monthly and yearly to generate a complaints per million unit for each product. From it, I generate data and a chart for the whole year's complaints. Here you can see a year-on-year complaint comparison. There's generally an improvement year on year, and you can also see summer peaks which are less pronounced as the performance improves. This is for the Northern Hemisphere. Here, the weekly summary is broken down into production lines for the benefit of communicating performance to staff. A memo or notification of serious complaints should be displayed to make staff aware of the complaint or for use in team briefs. Onto food safety management system. A food safety management system must be documented and maintained, including a summary of food safety policies and methods, the food safety policy statement and organizational chart, the processes and products included in the scope of certification, food safety regulations that apply, specifications, food safety procedures, GMPs, food safety plans, process controls, and other documentation necessary to support the SQF system. There should be a procedure for document control, including responsibilities for ensuring personnel have access to current documents and maintaining document control. A register of current food safety management system documents and amendments to documents should be maintained. Records. A system needs in place to verify, maintain, and retain records. Records must be securely stored. Legible records demonstrating compliance should be maintained. Records should be retained in accordance with company, customer, and legislation requirements. Note that FSMA requirements for records include the identity of the facility. Onto specifications, formulations, realization, and supplier approval. First up is product development. It requires that methods and responsibility for designing, developing, and converting product concepts to commercial realization to be documented and implemented. This cartoon always makes me laugh, although I have been at the wrong end of some similar situations. Development work should be carefully planned in stages. Specifications. There's requirements to develop, manage, and approve raw material, finished product, and packaging specifications. Raw materials, packaging, and ingredients need to be validated for food safety and to ensure they are fit for purpose. There needs to be descriptions for services for contract service providers. Specifications should be approved. There also needs to be verification of packaging. Finished product labels must be accurate, comply with legislation, and be approved. Products should bear appropriate information to ensure that adequate information is available to the next person in the food chain to enable them to handle the product safely. Insufficient product information can lead to products being mishandled at later stages in the food chains. Contract manufacturers. The methods and responsibility for ensuring all agreements relating to customers' product requirements must be documented and implemented. Onto the approved supplier program. The responsibility and procedure for selecting, evaluating, approving, and monitoring an approved supplier must be documented and implemented. Raw materials, ingredients, packaging materials, and services that impact on finished product safety must meet agreed specifications and be supplied by an approved supplier. Supplier approval and supplier monitoring needs to be based on risk. And suppliers need to be assessed by audit or questionnaire or whatever the method is. There are extensive requirements for the supply chain in Subpart G supply chain program of the risk-based preventive controls for human food. We're just going to look at some basics of this and what it all means overall. Your hazard analysis and supplier and risk material risk assessment will help you decide how a hazard is to be controlled and if it is to be controlled by a supply chain program. If you look at 3 scenarios for the presence of salmonella in an ingredient, chocolate is sprinkled on top of a cupcake without processing, flour that is cooked on site when baking cakes, whole milk powder that goes into a cake mix that is baked by the customer. The chocolate that is sprinkled on the top of a cake without processing. If the hazard is present in the ingredient, then it will be in the final product, as the chocolate does not receive a kill step on site. We are relying on the supplier ensuring that salmonella is not present in the chocolate. This material and supplier must be controlled by a supply chain program. 2. Flour that is cooked on site when baking cakes. If the hazard is present in the ingredient, it will be killed during the baking or cooking process. We are not relying on the supplier to ensure that salmonella is not present in the flour. A supply chain program is not required. The hazard is controlled by a process control preventive control. So whole milk powder that goes into a cake mix that is baked by the customer. If the hazard is present, it will be killed during the baking or cooking process by the customer. We are not relying on the supplier to ensure that salmonella is present in the whole milk powder. The supply chain program is not required. The hazard is controlled by the customer. Although we will want appropriate supplier controls to minimize the risk of purchasing a contaminated milk powder. The hazard analysis process identifies hazards requiring a supply chain control applied for which a supply chain program must be implemented. The program must include approved suppliers and determining, conducting, and documenting supply chain verification activities. Verification activities may include on-site audits required for serious hazards unless another approach is justified, sampling and testing, review of suppliers' food safety records, or other activities based on risk. Records that document all of these activities must be maintained. Back to the SQF code. Supplier approval can be assisted by certificate and scope validation directories. This is for suppliers that are certified to a benchmark standard. You need to make sure the scope is correct for the material or service that you are purchasing. There should also be methods and frequency of reviewing approved supplier performance and status. Product label and labeling good practices include any changes to labels are approved and communicated to goods receipt personnel. A signed approved standard should be provided to all staff carrying out checks. Onto food safety system section and 2.4.1 food legislation. Product delivered to customer must comply with food legislation applicable in the country of manufacture and sale. The good manufacturing practices described in the Food Safety Code Module 11 must be applied or exempted based on risk. And Food Safety Plan. A food safety plan should be prepared in accordance with the 12 steps identified in the Codex Alimentarius Commission HACCP guidelines. HACCP principles were changed in the 2020 revision. Prior to applying the HACCP principles, there are preliminary steps prior. The food safety plan or plan shall be developed and maintained. The food safety plan or plan should be developed and maintained by a multidisciplinary team that includes the SQF practitioner and those site personnel with technical, production, and engineering knowledge. These steps include defining the scope, writing product descriptions, defining the intended use, drawing a flow diagram, verifying the flow diagram. We should then identify and document all food safety hazards that can be reasonably expected to occur and conduct a hazard analysis for every identified hazard to determine which hazards are significant. The preventive controls rule includes these additional hazards: parasites, environmental pathogens, radiological hazards, unapproved food or color additives, unintentionally introduced hazards, intentionally introduced for the purpose of economic gain, the hazard analysis must include an evaluation of hazards identified to assess the severity of the illness or injury if the hazard were to occur, and the probability that the hazard will occur in the absence of preventive controls. There's also a requirement for hazard evaluation to include evaluation of environmental pathogens whenever a ready-to-eat food is exposed. There are also specific requirements to consider in hazard analysis 117130, including formulation of the food and any other relevant factors, such as temporal factors, which could include something like toxins in shellfish. So we need to determine and document control measures that must be applied to all significant hazards, and then identify any critical control points using the new decision tree or similar tool. Any preventive controls and CCPs will need validation. Food safety plans will include hazard control measure. For each identified CCP, we need to identify, validate, and document the critical limits, document procedures to monitor CCPs, deviation procedures, reference to relevant records. The documented and approved plan should be implemented in full, and the implementation monitored by the food safety team. There needs to be documented procedures and or work instructions that ensure the production of a consistently safe and legal product in compliance with the food safety plan. A full review of the documentation and implementation plan should be conducted at least annually. Although when there are changes to the process, equipment, or other changes affecting product safety, these changes need to be approved by authorized personnel. I use a process change approval form for this. For the preventive control rules, the written food safety plan must include hazard analysis, preventive controls, supply chain program, recall plan, procedures for monitoring, corrective action, verification procedures, and records. There's also an additional requirement for the owner, operator, or agent in charge of the facility to sign and date the food safety plan. Onto product sampling, inspection, and analysis. On-site laboratories need to be located and controlled to prevent a risk to product safety. Sampling and test methods shall be in accordance with the applicable requirements of ISO/IEC 17025, including annual proficiency testing for staff conducting analyses. The methods, responsibility, and criteria for sampling, inspecting, and analyzing raw materials, work in process, and finished products need to be documented and implemented. The significance of laboratory results should be understood and acted on. If product testing is used for verification, it must be scientifically valid and identify the test organization, test microorganism or procedure. Onto non-conforming materials and products. Documented procedures should describe how non-conforming materials and product is controlled. All staff should understand quarantine and release procedures. Records of non-conforming product and its alternate use or disposal should be maintained. Product rework. A documented procedure should be in place for rework. Procedures should describe responsibilities and ensure traceability is maintained. Rework is inspected or analysed before release. Rework operations are carried out by trained personnel and supervised as per the food safety plan. Rework should be identified and all rework should be recorded. Product release. A procedure should ensure that finished product is only released when legislative or other food safety controls have been met. Product should only be released by authorised personnel once all inspections and analyses are successfully completed, including a label check. The product release should be recorded. Onto environmental monitoring. A risk-based environmental monitoring program must be in place for all new food manufacturing processes. Environmental monitoring is required for an environmental pathogen or for an appropriate indicator organism if contamination of a ready-to-eat food with an environmental pathogen is a hazard requiring a preventive control. The environmental monitoring program should be risk-based. This is from FDA alerts for recalls. A significant number of recalls are due to contamination with well-known environmental pathogens, Salmonella and Listeria. Data since 2017 shows there were 376 recalls, which is 34% of all recalls. So an environmental sampling plan and testing schedule must be prepared. It must identify sites to be swabbed or monitored. It should also show details of the applicable pathogens of all indicator organisms. This is an example of an environmental monitoring schedule. Onto system verification. 2.51 is validation and effectiveness. You need to ensure that good manufacturing practices are confirmed to ensure they achieve the required result, and that critical food safety limits are reviewed annually and revalidated or justified when changes are made. Changes, processes, or procedures must be assessed to ensure that controls are still effective. A verification schedule must be prepared and implemented. The methods, responsibility, and criteria for verifying monitoring of good manufacturing practices, critical control points, and other food safety controls and the legality of products must be documented and implemented. A verification schedule outlining the verification activities, their frequency of completion, and the person responsible for each activity should be in place. Documented procedures should describe how corrections and corrective actions are investigated, resolved, managed, and controlled. Records of investigations, identification of the root cause, and resolution of corrections and corrective action, including non-compliances with critical food safety limits, should be maintained. Onto internal audits. A documented internal audit procedure with responsibility for scheduling and conducting an audit should be in place. Internal audits should be scheduled and conducted to verify the effectiveness of the food safety management system. Internal audits shall be conducted in full and at least annually. They can be managed using checklists. All applicable requirements of the SQF code should be audited as per the SQF checklist or similar tool. Staff conducting internal audits need to be trained and competent. Where practical, staff conducting internal audits need to be independent. Objective evidence should be recorded to verify compliance and/or non-compliance. Corrective and preventive actions are undertaken. Audit results should be communicated to relevant management personnel and staff responsible for implementing and verifying corrective and preventive actions. These actions then need to be closed out. Regular inspections of the site and equipment must be carried out to verify good manufacturing practices and facility and equipment maintenance. Records of internal audits and inspections and any corrective actions taken as a result of the audit shall be recorded. On to product traceability and crisis management. Product identification. The system must ensure raw materials, ingredients, packaging, work in progress, process inputs, and finished products are clearly identified during all stages of receipt, production, storage, dispatch. Finished product must be labeled to customer specification and regulatory requirements. There were new label control requirements in SQF 9. On to product trace. Finished product must be traceable to the customer. The effectiveness of the system should be tested. The traceability system must cover all through the process from the supplier and data receipt of raw materials through contract packaging and materials through to finished products. Lot identification is essential in product recall and also helps effective stock rotation. The responsibility and methods to withdraw recall products shall be documented and implemented, including identifying those responsible. There should be a communication plan to inform customers, consumers, authorities, and other bodies in a timely manner. An investigation should be undertaken to determine the root cause of a withdrawal, mock recall, or recall. The product withdrawal and recall system must be reviewed, tested, and verified as effective at least annually. Crisis management. There should be a procedure including a business continuity plan based on known dangers to product safety, such as flood, draft, fire, computer outage, pandemic, loss of electric or refrigeration, ammonia leak, labor strike. Food defense. A food defense threat assessment needs to be conducted to identify potential threats that can be caused by a deliberate act of sabotage or terrorist-like incident. Based on the assessment, a food defense plan must be documented, implemented, and communicated, providing details of the responsibility, controls, methods, and measures taken. On to food fraud. The methods, responsibility, and criteria for identifying the site's vulnerability to food fraud must be documented, implemented, and maintained. A food fraud mitigation plan must be written, providing details of the responsibility, controls, methods, and measures taken. On to allergen management. Responsibility methods used to control allergens and to prevent contamination from sources of allergens must be documented and implemented. The allergen management program should include a risk analysis of those raw materials, ingredients, and processing aids, including lubricants that contain food allergens. There should be a list of allergens that is applicable in the country of manufacture and the country of destination, if known. There should be an assessment of workplace-related allergens that may originate from areas such as locker rooms, vending machines, lunchrooms, etc. A list of allergens should be accessible to relevant staff. The control of hazards associated with allergens should be incorporated into the food safety plan. Control procedures may include scheduling, including changeover procedures, and there should be control of rework, such as ensuring that only like-for-like products are reworked. Based on risk assessment, there should be procedures for validation and verification of the effectiveness of cleaning and sanitation of areas and equipment in which allergens are used. So, another summary of FDA recall notices since 2017. 51% of recalls were due to mislabeling or undeclared allergens. So you can see that labeling and pack control is important. Sites need to document and implement methods to control the accuracy of finished product labels and assure work in progress and finished products are true to label with regard to allergens. Measures may include label approvals at receipt, label reconciliations during production, destruction of obsolete labels, verification of labels on finished product as appropriate, and product changeover procedures. So the last section in system elements is training. Training should be provided for personnel carrying out functions essential to the food safety management system and tasks related to food safety and legality. There should be training records which include name, skills, description of the training, date of training, training or training provider, and verification the trainee is competent. On to Module 11. So we'll look at the requirements of Module 11, good manufacturing practices for processing of food products. Section 11.1 is site location and premises. Local activities and the site environment need to be assessed to identify risks that may impact on product safety and implement measures to control the risks. The location of premises, operations, and land use must not affect hygiene and food safety. Potential sources of contamination from the environment should be considered. Establishments should be located away from potential contamination sources. The construction and ongoing operation of the premises shall be approved by the relevant authority. The construction and layout of the site, buildings, and facilities should be applicable to the operation. Onto building materials. There are prescribed standards for windows, stairs, catwalks, platforms, doors, ducting, conduit, pipes, hatches, floors, drains, walls, partitions, and ceilings. For lights and light fittings, particularly where a product is exposed, light fixtures need to be shatterproof, manufactured with a shatterproof covering, or fitted with protective covers. Also, lighting needs to be of appropriate intensity to enable the staff to carry out their tasks. A suitable area close to the processing line needs to be provided for inspection of product when online inspection is required. Proofing. External personnel access doors, external doors, including overhead dock doors, external windows, ventilation openings, doors, and other openings must be effectively sealed when closed and proofed against dust, vermin, and other pests. Adequate ventilation should be provided in enclosed processing and handling areas. Where appropriate, positive air pressure systems shall be installed. Equipment and utensils. Specifications for equipment and utensils and procedures for purchasing are required. Equipment and utensils need to meet regulatory requirements and not pose a risk of contamination. A suitable external environment needs to be established, monitored and periodically reviewed. The premises it surrounds, storage facilities, machinery and equipment should be free of waste or accumulated debris and vegetation so as not to attract pests or present a food safety hazard. Onto site operation. Repairs and maintenance. Maintenance methods and responsibilities must be documented. Maintenance must be carried out in a manner that minimizes the risk of contamination. Where there is a risk, maintenance chemicals such as lubricants should be food grade. Maintenance staff and contractors must comply with hygiene requirements. Maintenance staff and contractors need to remove all tools and debris from any maintenance activity once it has been completed. They need to inform the area supervisors so appropriate hygiene and sanitation can be conducted and a pre-operational inspection completed prior to restarting of operations. The methods and responsibility for calibration of measuring, test and inspection equipment used for key monitoring activities must be documented and implemented. Equipment should be protected from damage and unauthorized adjustment. Equipment must be calibrated to national or international reference standards. Pest prevention. A comprehensive, documented pest prevention program needs to be effectively implemented. There are specific requirements in the SQF code that you should refer to. The chemicals used are required to be approved by the relevant authority and their safety data sheet should be available. Common pests include rats, mice, cockroaches, flying insects and birds. There should be adequate measures in place to prevent birds from entering buildings or roosting. Pest contractors and pest controllers shall be licensed and approved with the appropriate training. Cleaning and sanitation. The methods and responsibility for the effective cleaning of food handling and processing equipment and environment and other areas needs to be documented and implemented. Consideration needs to be given to who is responsible for the cleaning, validation of the cleaning for food contact surfaces, including CIP, the responsibility and methods to verify the effectiveness of the cleaning and sanitation program. There may be other relevant standards that you need, such as standards for cleaning equipment. Detergents and sanitizers need to be suitable for use in a food manufacturing environment. They need to be labeled according to regulatory requirements and purchased in accordance with legislation. There are other specific requirements for cleaning in place, CIP, cleaning equipment, tools, racks and other items, suitably equipped areas for cleaning product containers, and other requirements for knives, cutting boards and other utensils. Also racks and containers for storing cleaned utensils. The limits of acceptable and unacceptable cleaning performance need to be defined for food contact surfaces and processing equipment. Pre-operational inspections should be conducted by qualified personnel. A record of pre-operational hygiene inspections, cleaning and sanitation activities and verification activities needs to be maintained. Onto personnel hygiene and welfare. There are rules for personnel welfare to prevent the contamination of product or processing operations. Hand wash stations must be provided adjacent to personnel access points and in appropriate locations in food areas as required. A risk analysis is required to ensure that the clothing and hair policy protects materials, food, and food contact surfaces from unintentional microbiological or physical contamination. Clothing worn by staff must be maintained, stored, laundered, and worn so as not to present a contamination risk. Jewelry and other loose objects should not be worn or taken into food handling or processing areas. Visitors must wear suitable clothing and footwear and comply with hygiene rules when entering any food processing or handling area. There are requirements for staff amenities, including specifics for changing rooms, high-risk changing areas, toilets, and break rooms, and outside eating areas. High-risk change areas need to be provided for staff engaged in the processing of high-risk foods or processing operations in which clothing can be soiled. So for staff engaged in food handling and process operations, these staff need to ensure that products and materials are handled and stored in a way such as to prevent damage or product contamination. People working on or visiting food handling or processing operations need to comply with the prescribed hygienic practices. The flow of personnel in food processing and handling areas needs to be managed such that potential contamination is minimized. Onto water, ice, and air supply. Adequate supplies of potable water from a known clean source must be provided. Supplies of hot and cold water must be provided to enable effective cleaning. Non-potable water should be identified and controlled. Water treatment, or any water treatment, should be effective and monitored. There is a requirement that water complies with local, national, or international recognized potable water microbiological and quality standards when used for specific practices. Microbiological analysis is also required for water and ice supplies. Ice provided for use during processing operations or a processing aid or as an ingredient needs to comply with the same potable water standards. There are also standards for ice rooms and receptacles. Compressed air and other gases, such as carbon dioxide or nitrogen, that contacts food or food contact surfaces needs to be clean and present no risk to food safety. Air and gas systems should be maintained and monitored. Onto receipt, storage, and transport. There should be safe, hygienic receipt and storage of raw materials, including chilled, frozen, and ambient, ingredients, packaging, equipment, and chemicals. There are also requirements in the SQF code for cold storage, freezing, and chilling of foods, and storage of dry ingredients, packaging, and shelf-stable packaged goods. There are requirements for the storage of hazard chemicals and toxic substances. The practices applied during loading, transport, and unloading of food shall maintain appropriate storage conditions and product integrity. Foods must be loaded, transported, and unloaded under conditions suitable to prevent cross-contamination. During transport of food, measures should be taken where necessary to protect food from potential sources of contamination, damage likely to render the food unsuitable for consumption, and provide an environment which effectively controls the growth of pathogenic or spoilage organisms and the production of toxins. Vehicles should be fit for purpose and adequately designed and constructed. Vehicles need to be secured from tampering using seals or other agreed upon and acceptable devices or systems. Loading and unloading docks need to be designed to protect the product during loading and unloading. Loading practices need to be designed to minimize unnecessary exposure of the product to conditions detrimental to the product. On to separation of functions. The processing of high-risk foods must be conducted under controlled conditions. There must be protection and segregation from other processes, raw materials, or staff who handle raw materials to ensure that cross-contamination is prevented. There are requirements for changing into clean, distinct, protective clothing. Requirements for the control of thawing of foods, including having the appropriate rooms and or equipment, are included in this section of the SQF code. Onto the control of foreign matter. The responsibility and methods used to prevent foreign matter contamination of the product must be documented and implemented. And there should be methods and procedures to control glass, brittle materials. There should be breakage procedures, and there should be the control of knives where used. Systems should be in place to prevent contamination of foods by foreign bodies. Suitable detection or screening devices should be used where necessary. Based on risk assessment, procedures should be implemented to minimize foreign body contamination originating from the packaging container, such as jars, cans, and other preformed rigid containers. This can include covered conveyors, container inversion, and foreign body removal through rinsing with water or air jets. Physical product contamination controls include metal control, control of sharp metal implements, and control of stationary items like staples and paper clips. Your hazard analysis should be the starting point for implementing an effective foreign body control program. Potential hazards and the sources of those hazards must be identified so that appropriate control procedures can be put in place to minimize the likelihood of product contamination. So other physical contaminants include things that stationary, as I've mentioned, but also can come from when unpacking raw materials, such as deboxing. Wood should not be used in open product areas unless there's a process requirement. It can be a physical and a microbiological hazard. Onto detection of foreign objects. The responsibility, methods, and frequency for monitoring, maintaining, calibrating, and using screens, sieves, filters, or other technologies to remove or detect foreign matter must be documented and implemented. Onto waste disposal. The responsibility and methods to collect, handle, and store waste prior to removal from the premises must be documented and implemented. Waste should be removed on a regular basis and not allowed to accumulate. Reviews of the effectiveness of waste management should be included in site inspections. So I just want to mention a couple of things in here. Some things you can reference back to. You'll get a copy of the presentation. So there are at least 20 requirements to look at risk or assess risk in the SQF code. And as I said, there's a list in the PDF presentation that you can refer back to. Also note, you may need to also need to consider other areas of legislation, such as food defence, where the food defence plan needs to be signed by an owner, operator, and agent in charge, and also needs to have a qualified individual. And also there's requirements for sanitary transportation, where you need to ensure sanitary transportation practices for food transported by motor and rail vehicles within the US. There's also some information on previous certification audit non-conformances. So there's the top 10 critical non-conformances from 21 and 22. Top 5 major non-conformances from 21 and 22. And the top 10 minor non-conformances from 21 and 22. So obviously, the SQF resources, there's many on the SQF site. So we'll just highlight a few here. Obviously, the codes are free to download there. There's also tip sheets and guidance. There's also events and training. So I'll come on to any questions. Just a couple of things to finish with. The IFSQN for a range of SQF Food Safety Management System implementation packages. And our latest package is this SQF and FSMA Food Safety Management System implementation package. This includes many of the tools and documents you'll have seen today. And I think in the office tab, there's a link to our SQF implementation packages. Anyway.
Yeah, I put that in the sidebar. Yeah, thanks very much, Tony. Just get rid of the slides. Yeah, I put a link in the sidebar. So all the documents and templates and things that you saw during that presentation most of them came out of the implementation packages that are linked in the sidebar. And if you click on that, find out more, there are a range of SQF packages. The one at the top for SQF and FSMA, the latest one, and then SQF without FSMA. Then you've got for packaging, storage and distribution. So whichever area of the food industry you're from, there's something suitable for you, and they're very comprehensive and come with online support from Tony as well. So great value. Anyway, let's get on with the questions. So a question from Aman. SQF practitioner can be a part of internal audits. So can the practitioner also be part of internal audits?
No problem with that. Yeah.
Okay, quick and easy. Question from Rispa. Can OPLs be used to communicate to teams customer complaints and CAPA, or only memos to be used?
Oh no, it's just memos are just they used to call me Memo Man, which is a bit embarrassing, but and any sort of effective communication are fine. The point I'm making is it's important to get that communication to the shop floor in whatever way you do, whether you go and talk to them, but obviously presenting nice information in graphs and tables by production lines gives good feedback to people on how they're performing in terms of complaints. And as part of all this global food safety culture, they should be all involved in achieving a certain complaint level overall on the site and for their production line.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Matt, what's your advice on how to create a customer complaint program that analyzes complaints and creates trend analysis?
We do a nice little training program on that, but what I do is I log all the complaints. They go into an Excel file, and we analyze them by product line, product type, product size, type of complaint, and we analyze them by complaint per million units. So you need your sales figures by product line. And then automatically you can see which are the higher number, the worst complaints. You can see the highest numbers anyway, but you can also see the worst complaint lines by the complaints per million units. And then I showed you a graph there where I show you I convert that data into a 3D graph. and then I can take the annual stuff and monthly stuff and project it over a year. So it's all good. And I just use Excel to do that. But on the IFSQM website, there's a complaint training course, which includes that analyzer or simplified version of it and how to use it.
Okay, question from Syed. Is it possible to have SQF certification but no HACCP plan, or have a HACCP plan without a CCP?
Yeah, I think you can have let's call it a food safety plan. Yeah, and so we'll call it a food safety plan. And yes, you can have a food safety plan without a CCP. And a lot of the trends these days, and I refer to Codex, General Principles of Food Hygiene, but a lot of the emphasis in there is about controls using good manufacturing practices and verifying those. So, whereby everything, old days gone by, everybody used to say everything's a CCP. Now there's more and more emphasis on controls by GMPs, but verifying and validating those. So you don't necessarily have to have a CCP, but I think your food safety plan, you should still have a food safety plan.
Okay, just going back to the complaints question, I've put a link to the training course. It's called Complaint Management and Performance Improvement Training. If you purchase that, it's $97 for 4 hours, and it's a recording, and you get 30-day access. And in that, as Tony says, you receive the Complaint Trend Analyzer, which is a very valuable tool.
I'm not one for bragging much, but I spent a lot of time in the food industry where you were absolutely hammered if you had bad complaints, and I was very successful in reducing complaints using that system. I don't brag very much, but that is one of the feathers in my cap for sure.
Well, there you go. Okay. Question from Kipochi. Excuse my pronunciation. Ready to eat or going for further processing, or any instructions for further processing before consumption? I don't know if it's part of a chat or whether it's a question.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but whatever you consume, whatever the consumer or the customer needs to do with a product, they clearly need instructions in some way. And for me, 100% sure, you can't just pass them a procedure. You need to have instructions on the label.
Okay. Question from Martin. What opinion do you have about small FBOs that do not need to implement HACCP in their plants, since according to question 1 of the decision tree, they only need PPRO, and I think that they do not protect the consumer, but rather the small FBO, and most outbreaks associated with small FBOs?
I think small FBOs still need to control significant hazards. The question 1 of the decision tree actually talks about, is the hazard controlled by good practices? I've got it here. Can the significant hazard be controlled to an acceptable level at this step by prerequisite programs such as good hygienic practices? So a lot of small businesses might say that, but yes, it can be controlled. But let's say you're a small business and you're cooking chicken. And there's lots of small businesses where I am that serve up cooked chicken. Now, cooking chicken to a minimum temperature is a CCP, however you want, whatever size of your organization. So I'm not sure that your question really hits the mark for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Question from Charmin. Do SQF practitioners still need to be certified?
They can be qualified. They need to be qualified. You can argue that you're qualified based on experience and ability, and then the auditor can assess your ability on the system and the food safety plans and procedures that you've implemented.
Okay, and following on from that, Desiree, which training is most important for the SQF practitioner?
It would, for me, it would be HACCP training, food safety.
Okay.
Obviously, if you haven't got any experience of GFSI benchmark standards or the SQF code, then it would be important for you to probably do some training to get up to speed. But if you've been working with another benchmark standard, then you probably get up to speed with the SQF code quite quickly.
And on that note, shameless plug, we've got our HACCP training course coming up on October the 27th. It's a live training for 4 hours with Tony. So if anybody's interested, you can, I've put the link in the chat there. I'm not meaning to do this, just coming up. So
I think a lot of people do it by the recording, but I think it's good if you can make the live webinar, because like this, you can ask questions, and which you don't get that with a recording. I mean, the recording is great for doing it at your convenience, but up to you really. You can try and make the live recording and the live webinar, but still have the recording anyway if you don't make it in the end.
Yeah. So that's it. So if you purchase it now, you'd get the previous recording, access for 30 days. If you select for the next live one, you can join live and have access to that latest recording for 30 days. But anyway, the point is there is a great 4-hour practical HACCP training course that's online webinar with Tony. You can ask questions, and there's lots of great content and documents there as well. So if you need a refresh on HACCP or you're new to it, it might be worth a go. Question from Rufus. Do safety officers perform risk analysis on productivity?
This is food safety, I presume you mean. I think not necessarily, but I mean, as a senior manager in the food manufacturing previously, I felt accountable for the overall operational efficiency and profitability of the organization, of the site. So as part of the team, you need to be collectively have KPIs that you need to achieve, a certain efficiency that you're helping to achieve collectively as a team. And so, you are contributing, but I'm not sure you would do a risk analysis on productivity, but you wouldn't want to implement measures for the sake of it that actually affected product efficiency. So, like you said, you want to take your swabs in the morning and you want to do 20 swabs when in practice which take an hour, when in practice you know that you can target 3 key areas, do 3 swabs in 5 minutes, and if it passes, let production start up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question from Azila. Is supplier quality management part of food safety plan?
So FSMA it is. For SQF, it can be whatever you want it to be. It can be in the food safety plans if you want it to be, or it can be as a separate risk assessment. I do it as a separate risk assessment normally, but other than if I'm doing work for somebody in the US.
Okay. Kirsten. My SQF SWF checklist edition 9 only includes 2.1 to 2.9.2.3. Where is the rest of it that covers part B, or is there one?
Part B 2 to 2.9 is system elements, and then there's probably another tab or sheet that's I don't know what checklist you've got, but for good manufacturing practices. Module 11, it should be. That one is 2.1 to 2.9 is system elements. There should also be a checklist for module 11, good manufacturing practices.
Okay. Philomena, question. Would you recommend an SQF practitioner get PCQI certification?
If you're in the US or it's appropriate PCQI, it's appropriate. Yes, I mean it's a HACCP qualification in effect. So yes.
Okay. Just a few more and then we're done. Dave Barnes says, great information as usual. Thanks for doing these free webinars.
Thank you.
Izila, no, we've done that one. RISPA saying, do you have risk assessment training recordings?
Did you do one with, well,
who?
Didn't you do one with
Vladimir?
Vladimir, you know?
We did actually, yeah. If you check the store, there's a list of all the training courses available there. Okay, I think we're going to have to leave it there. We don't want to get into product specific things. So yeah, we've run 15 minutes over as well. So thanks very much, Tony. Great presentation, superb content as usual. And yeah, you'll get access to the recording, everybody, the slides, and the certificate is in the sidebar, and we'll follow up with an email shortly after. So thanks for a great session, Tony. Cheers for your time.
Thanks very much. Thank you, everybody.
Okay,
Have a
cheers.
good weekend. Cheers.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.